All right, my wonderful and amazing fourth graders, we are looking at lesson 5 in our social studies text, starting on page 49. What was life like in Spanish and Mexican California? People who moved to an area for different reasons often live in different kinds of communities. This was true of the Spanish and Mexican settlers who lived in California. How were these new settlements different? So we know, having and have been learning about the missions, and that the Spanish had come and built these missions. We're now at this new time in history where Mexico is gaining its independence from Spain, much the same way that the United States got their independence from England, from the King of England. And so the same thing happened. Mexico decided, hey, why is this king on the other side of the world in charge of us? We should be in charge of ourselves. And they went to war and they won and they became their own country. And at that time, California was part of Mexico. So we're going to hear a little bit about that change in history and kind of what happened to the missions as well. So our vocabulary, our first word is occupy. Occupy. You try it? Good. It is a verb and it means to take control of a place. So for example, the Spanish came in and they began to occupy the areas around the missions. Then Mexican settlers came in later getting land grants, and they began to occupy areas of California. All right, the next word, we talked about this one before, presidio. Presidio. You try it? A presidio is a Spanish word for fort. It's just a fort. Presidio is a fort. The next word, pueblo. Pueblo. You try it? Good. That's a Spanish word for village or town. So we know a presidio is a fort where soldiers might live. A pueblo is a town or village where settlers might live. Land grant. Your turn. So a land grant is land given by a government. And in California at this time, the missions were coming to an end. Remember, the mission were built by the Spanish and by the Spanish king. Well, that king's not in charge anymore. So that mission land was very, very important and worth a lot. So the new government, the Mexican government, took those mission lands and they gave them away to other people as land grants. So this is a time in history where the missions are kind of coming to an end. Some of that land was then given to Mexican citizens so that they could have what's called a rancho. I bet you can figure out what a rancho is. Cover up the O, it's a ranch. That's what a rancho is. We got the word ranch from rancho. So you try the word. A rancho is a large area of land where crops are grown and horses, cattle, sheep, and pigs are raised. So a rancho is very similar. It's like a farm, but a really, really important part of that farm is the animals. So even though they do grow crops, a big, big important part is that they have animals, especially cattle on a rancho. All right, next word, economy. Economy. You try that word? Good. I'm going to tell you right now, you might want to put a little symbol here, that $sign, because economy has to do with money. It has to do with getting things that you need in order to survive. Okay? So economy is the system of producing and consuming goods in a country, state, or local area. So products, we know that the California Indians were taught how to make many products, such as they would make leather. That was a huge, one of the most important products that came from the missions, which then became ranchos. And the cattle, they would use those cattle hides to make leather. And sometimes that leather might be for boots or belts or clothing or saddles, but most, it was also used in industry. There were a lot of places in the world that were starting to build machines, and they needed these leather, we call them belts, but it's not like a belt you'd wear around your waist, but it's the same idea. These leather strips that would help the machines run. And that, so that was, for example, products. So you think about all the different things the missions made. Tallow from the cow's fat, which would make soap or candles, or it might make some kind of an oil or liquid, again, for those machines that were being built. We know they also made olive oil and wine. So these were the products that so when it says producing goods, a good is basically a product. Consuming means the people that want those products. So sometimes you might trade. The California Indians were great at trading. They might make a product and then trade it for something they couldn't make themselves that they wanted to consume. So this is what an economy is, and we do this to this day. Today, though, we usually use money. But you guys have your own economy. Sometimes when school's in session, you might have something in your lunch that you think is awesome, and your friend might have something in their lunch that they think is awesome, but you guys kind of want to have each other's, and you might come up with a trade. And even though you're not supposed to do that, we all know you do. So in an economy, you can relate that to the idea of trading. Now what we do is we trade money for what we need. I don't just get to go and grab a car from a car dealership. I have to pay for it. If I want that product, I need to give them something so that I can consume, and keep that product. And nowadays, it's money that we use. And even back then, they did use money, absolutely. And they might get money for their products, and then they could purchase things they need. Or they might say, hey, I've got all of this tallow, and this is worth a lot. What are you going to give me for this tallow? And then they might get some supplies that they need. So that would be a form of trade as well. All right, lots of important words in this one. So up there, it does ask you to underline the words that describe places. So there are several places that we're going to be talking about in here. We know that one of the places is a presidio, or a fort. A pueblo is a place. It's a town or village. A rancho is a place. It's land, where a ranch might be. Now, I know you might think land grant, because land grant is land, but technically it's the word grant. It's land that's given away, so it's not really a place as much as it is an action where you're getting something. All right? All right, compare and contrast. So we know we're looking for things that are similar or different, alike or different. So we're going to be thinking about how the Spanish and Mexican settlements were different. All right, here we go. Next page, I'm going to move it over so you can hopefully see it pretty well. So we always start by looking at our headings in red. So we have missions, which we've been learning about. We have Spanish forts, which we know now is a presidio. We have farming villages, which we know are pueblos. And we have Mexican ranches, which we know are ranchos that came from land grants. Now, so those were our headings. And one thing I want to show you is that they do have a very interesting, it's in red, a Spanish mission. And one of the things I love about this, and I've always wondered, like, why wouldn't they have this earlier when we were learning more about missions? But look, this shows you how all missions looked. And this is true. Every single mission was built in this quadrilateral shape. Now, it could be a square or it could be a rectangle. And there's usually a big church on one corner. And then they might have housing for soldiers in that quadrilateral, or it might be outside of it. It just depended. But you can see so I really want you to study this and think about the different buildings and work areas that you see in there. All right, questions for number 1, it says underline examples of how work on a mission was different for men and women. Okay, so they're going to be talking about what men and women did at the missions, and we're trying to find what's different. So we need to look for the work that men and women did and how they were different. All we've got to do is underline that information. Question 2. What was the purpose of a presidio? Okay, so why do we have presidios? What is its purpose? Why would they build presidios? So you'll think about where that word is and make sure you're focusing around that area when you're thinking about it. All right, next side, here we go. So here, this next section, farming villages, pueblos, it says, why were pueblos important to the presidios? Okay, so these pueblos did something for the presidios. So we need to think about why are those pueblos important specifically to the presidios. Remember, the presidios are where the soldiers are. It's the fort. So how did the pueblos kind of affect, what did they have to do with the presidios? So I want you to think about where in here, it's a very short paragraph, so I think you're going to be able to figure out, how do pueblos help presidios? If they're important to a presidio, that means they must do something for the presidio. All right, Mexican ranches, rancheros, ranchos. All right, so again, we're underlining examples of how ranchos and pueblos were different. Okay, so we're looking for this idea of different. How is a rancho different from a pueblo? So again, compare and contrast. Down at the bottom, different kinds of settlements were important to the history of California. Describe the 4 kinds of settlements that developed during Spanish and Mexican rule. So right here, it tells us all of them. Missions, Spanish forts, presidios, farming villages, pueblos, and ranchos, Mexican ranchos. All right? So I'm hoping that will help you a little bit. The next page is a little extra. You're not required to do this, but when you turn this in, I will look at if you've tried this. This has to do with that idea of absolute location. So remember we talked about how we have lines of latitude and lines of longitude, and how if we can find where those lines meet, we can find locations. Well, in this case, what we're going to be using is our compass rose: north, south, east, west. And we have to decide, we know that somewhere in between, like over here, that's southeast. Over here, that's southwest. Going up this way, northwest. Going up this way, northeast. So you'll notice the north and south is always first before you do the east or the west. So we're going to be looking at locations. For example, maybe we look at Sacramento. And we need to decide, where is Sacramento compared to San Diego? So notice they're asking us, okay, thinking when it says, use the map to find San Diego's relative location to Sacramento. So that means I'm in San Diego, and I want to get to Sacramento. So I need to think about which direction am I traveling? And I can look at my compass rose where I just added some new information down there. Okay, and you guys know, never eat soggy waffles, and now you can see those in-between parts. So decide, what direction would you be going if you started in San Diego and you went to Sacramento? And then there's more questions similar to that. All right, so I think you're going to do just fine on this. And like I said, there's a lot of really great information about this change from the mission era when the Spanish were in charge to where Mexico was its own country. And we're actually going to be doing some more. As we read more in this, it'll give us more information. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as well. Awesome jobs. Get reading.